Three, two, one. Hi, and welcome to yet another episode of Yet Another Expat. This is episode number 7, and I just realized that I released these episodes on a Monday morning, which probably means that my voice should try to energize you and bring you back in this energy state that is probably required. But the truth is, I am recording on a Sunday night, so you will get one more of your favorite Tired Voice episodes. Now, before we dive, I wanted to take a moment and address the name of the episode. I know it's called Yet Another Expat, and by now you know it as well. And I know that you might be thinking, it's probably a bit insensitive, right? And you're absolutely right. The term expat comes with a lot of baggage and privilege. I know that the term expat often conjures images of well off people are living some sort of glamorous life in foreign lands and sipping cocktails by the poolside. So just know that by calling this podcast Yet Another Expat, I'm just poking fun at the term, but while I'm also acknowledging its flaws, because it is a flawed term. But I believe that embracing a flawed or controversial term can actually be a way to draw attention. So yes, I am aware of sort of privilege that comes for someone being able to choose to use the term expat in this playful manner. For many people, migration is not a choice, but a necessity driven by economic, political, or social factors. In fact, if you listen to this podcast, you will get a pretty good perspective on my worldview as well. I try to keep it light, but I don't think it's always easy. So, yeah, just know that as we embark on this podcast journey together, know that I do keep a very open mind and a critical eye towards language and inclusivity in general. And I just wanted to do a little bit of a disclaimer around choosing this stupid name. No one has asked me to, but I feel like it's a good thing to do just in case someone thinks that I am not aware of using such a name. This is mostly a satiric podcast. And of course, this podcast is aimed to all international people and all the people in general. So, thank you for tuning in, and let's dive into this. I think that by now you are kind of my stakeholders in this podcast, that you are my board of directors. So just know on the podcast data side, we are growing. For whatever reason, this podcast has now at least one listener in South Korea and one in Iceland, which I find amazing. Welcome if you're still here. I would love to know where you're listening this podcast from and if I am your company in doing the dishes or taking a morning commute or cleaning your house. I know I'm not the main thing happening here, and that's all right. This is something that I acknowledge, accept, and enjoy. In terms of other podcast stuff, I've been wondering if I need a better intro. All of the good podcasts have some sort of song that says, "This is yet another expat, a podcast with Hermes," or something of that sort. I have some smooth jazz going on, but perhaps it's time to get something better going. If for any reason you're a creator of any type of music and you want to write a mini segment of 6 or 7 seconds to play as an intro or outro, this is your chance. It's like taking a ticket for an early startup that is growing. This could be it. So reach out to my Instagram or Spotify. The first person who wants to make a small sample or segment as an intro, I'm game. Let's do it. Royalty free is good, but this would be much more cool and meaningful. I hope the previous episode was not. It did feel a bit like the meme old man yells at a cloud. You know, the usual AI, dopamine, the system, how they want to harvest our time, and all of that. So, one thing is for sure, I'm probably never getting a sponsor, maybe some wellness app on how to quit your social media. As a last thing, always please fact check anything I'm saying yourselves. I think this should go as a disclaimer. There's one more thing that happened in the previous episode and probably is the most important to address, and I haven't addressed it so far. I said that I will be sharing stories of crows, and I didn't. So I want to apologize from everyone for not sharing the crow stories. This is what we will be doing today. I know I owe you. I know you started the previous episode thinking that you're going to listen to crow stories, and instead you heard me talk about the AI revolution and universal basic income and Amazon stopping the workers from unionizing with algorithms and all that. And you were like, hey, Hermes, where are the crow stories? I came here for the fun. I came for the facts to get ready for the party this weekend. And you didn't get that. So I apologize. Let's hear today about crows. But before we do, here are some small thoughts I wanted to share. Last week, the index of the happiest countries was released. And guess what? Norway is the happiest place in the world. Greece is, I think, somewhere from 60 to 80. I don't remember right now. The Nordics are scoring quite high, and especially looking at what's happening in Greece around the privatization of education and the destruction of the public healthcare systems. Maybe one of the reasons why these countries are scoring as the happiest places in the world is the fact that they have free healthcare and free education. Maybe that is a good baseline to bring to a society, having educated and healthy people. And of course, when we say, free healthcare and free education, they're not free. I hope that this is very clear. They're paid through the taxes. And these countries have really high taxes, but at least it's a sort of joy to feel like your taxes are going somewhere. This is an unknown state for us Greeks. In Greece, your taxes, the feeling is that your taxes are going into a black hole that sucks everything in and spits out nepotism and favoritism and other beautiful things like that. But this is why people leave their countries, and this is why people try to find better conditions and quality of life in other countries. Of course, you can never get it all right. Here's a small thing that I like about Berlin compared to Greece. Very, very often you see people having flowers in their hands. People are actually buying flowers. There is a lot of love for flowers in Berlin. There are a lot of flower shops around. There are really not many flower shops in Athens. There are not that many flower shops in other European countries I've been. But it feels like Germany is still romantic. This is just a small thing, but just walking on the streets and seeing people with bouquets of flowers in their hands just makes you smile. And I think one of the main differences from some European cities to others, or one of the biggest factors of getting a sense of the quality of life, for me at least, is to see people's faces on the streets. The way people walk, the way people smile, the way people behave. You can really feel the social stressor and the socioeconomic stress that some countries are experiencing, because that manifests in the way that you walk to go to work, and the stress in you and the struggle is just, it's just there. It's not that it's hiding. And it has been, when I go back to Athens, that this strikes me as a big difference. There is so much tension. You can literally feel that everyone is ready to snap. But I will not go into that now. I'm not about comparing. I just wanted to say I find it so beautiful that people are buying flowers around, and flower shops is a very active thing in Berlin. I think it makes it a tiny bit more beautiful, more colorful, more scents, more smells. Of course, there is the other side that flowers are being cut, they're being grown, they're being harvested in a probably not sustainable way, but that is a different topic. When I was young, I would walk to school every day, and the way to school had a few shops, and one of them was a flower shop. And the only reason why there was a flower shop in Athens is that next to it there was a hospital, and this is always a good combo. But anyways, I was walking to school up and down in the very early ages of elementary or preschool. I remember looking at a corner flower shop, and I knew that when people finish school, then they need to get a job. That this was my simple understanding of things. You go to school, when you're done with school, you go to work, and this is how things go. So I was wondering what would be a work that I could do. And that flower shop looked so lovely. So I remember actually thinking, maybe I go work at that flower shop. And that's such a cute thought, right? Because I thought, working at a flower shop, if you get to be all day somewhere, why not be somewhere that it looks nice? And I was imagining that my job would be to hand people flowers. And how beautiful is it to hand people flowers? So why not I do that and also get paid? Making people happy, getting paid for it. I was probably already a professional people pleaser now that I think about it more, but I'll just keep the romantic thought of wanting to have my own flower shop. What was your first thought of what you would be doing as a job? Do you still remember why so many kids want to be driving the garbage truck? I actually think that it's one of the first professions that you can connect as a child and understand what the hell they're doing. Because so many of the jobs are invisible to you. You don't know what people are doing. And this is one of the first ones that you see the garbage truck, you see the people working there coming, getting all the things, throwing them in this big monster, cleaning the streets. You feel the gratitude for the service, you feel the coolness of the big truck, and you also, it's there in your face. You feel that you just got the whole job description just by looking at the street or your balcony. So I can understand why it makes much more sense than I want to be a people manager or I want to be a marketing director. But anyway, if you still remember what it was that you wanted to be as a first memory, maybe write that as a reply in the podcast. Maybe that could be a fun thing to bring or not. Okay, it's time for the crows. I owe you this, so here it goes. This segment talks about crows, why I love them, why they are so smart, why they are the best animal, and what you can do to have your own crow army. So, a few high level ways of why crows are so smart. And when I say crows, I also mean ravens, maybe a few other of that kind. The first thing that they do is that they can use tools. These birds can be used sticks, twigs, they even use wires to extract food from hard to reach places. And this is showcasing very high problem solving skills. The actual usage of tools in the evolutionary track does take a long way to arrive. Think of the smartest animals you know. How many tools do they use? Tool usage is something that really distinguished us in the primate time. So they have crazy problem solving skills. They can solve complex puzzles to get food. They can put the right shapes in the right order. If you put food in a small bucket, and give them things to add in that bucket, they know that by adding things, the water level rises and eventually they will get what they want to eat. They have great memory. They can remember specific people. They can remember locations or food sources. They remember past interactions. And they also have social intelligence. They cooperate together. There are experiments where they are asked to do something simultaneously to get the reward, or they need to sacrifice a mediocre treat just so that they later on get a better treat together. They can warn each other about potential threats. They can share information with the groups, which is pretty scary. If you fuck up with a crow, then the whole crow community will know. And I have a lot of stories of crows coming right up. So soak on this knowledge and get ready for why these crazy stories I bring probably make sense and could very well be truth. So crows are also great in communication. They can vocalize. They can say words. They can make different sound, different frequencies. They can convey different messages like warnings or greetings or expressions of distress. They can get very creative when they have novel challenges, they change their strategies and they can adapt based on the situation, which shows a high level of cognitive adaptability. They're pretty playful. You've probably seen videos of crows being friends with cats or dogs or biting a cat's tail back and forth. And it could be one of their ways that they develop skills and learn. They can mimic. They are able to mimic sounds, including the human speech. If you haven't heard a crow speak, you can very well do so. And unlike me, they're good at long term planning. So they can plan for the future. They can store food in multiple locations and remember where they have hidden it, displaying foresight and strategic thinking. The crows are smarter than a lot of us. And lastly, they do this thing, a cultural transmission. They are able to pass on knowledge and skills through generations. They learn from observation and experience, contributing to the development of cultural behaviors within their populations. So, with that in mind, let's dive in all of the great stories I have collected around crows, crow YouTube videos, crow Reddit channels. I love reading comments and I love good stories. So here is some of that. One thing that is very common is crows bringing back little presents if you start feeding them. That can include pennies, smooth rocks, pieces of glass, whatever they see as valuable, pieces of colorful string, and this is one of their ways to befriend you when you are a good food source for them. But things get much more complicated. So this one story says, I had a neighbor who shot a crow with a BB gun. A BB gun is a gun with small plastic bullets. The crows all went mafia on the kid. He could no longer go into his backyard or ride his bike, or the crows would attack. One day, I went over to his house, as I was friends with his brother, and the crows saw me in the yard with the kid, and they began going after me, thinking that I was part of their group. So later on, I took on to feed some of the crows at my home, which was at the same block, and after a few days, they forgave me and stopped attacking me. Crows remember. So in this story, this person was not harming crows, he was just going to the same house where this kid was that had shot a crow with a BB gun. Everyone who goes to that house is a potential threat for the crows, as it seems. And it seems that crows do remember. They will pass on the information about someone who treated them badly. Reading another one, a friend of mine took in a crow with a wounded wing, and it nursed it back to health. She released it from her apartment window when it could fly around again. A few months later, the same crow showed up with a friend who also had a wounded wing. And it seems that the word got out amongst the crows that her apartment was treating wounds. So her apartment turned into a crow ER. One time, even a pigeon showed up. And the comment continues saying how the next year, the pigeon even brought her babies over to show off, saying that her place had often 3 or 4 birds in recovery. How crazy is that? And how beautiful. If you're a crow and you receive some help, you go and spread the word. I would also say, hey, it's like, have you played Pokemon where you could go to the Poke Center and it would fix your Pokemon? Well, it's not exactly the same, but maybe. One more story on the ingenuity of the crows is this one. And here's where you can see that truly they're maximizing for their own outcome, especially when it comes to food. So, this comment says, I just want to add about the ingenuity of crows. My kids and I went to the bird show at our zoo. The presenter was sharing a story about how they trained crows to pick up trash, like plastic straws, by rewarding the crows every time they would deposit a straw in a collection device. So, this is so smart, right? We think, okay, if we can train crows to do something useful, let's train them to pick up plastic straws, put them in a collection device, and give them some food. Well, it turns out that the crows figured out that if they cut the straw into smaller pieces, then they would get more treats for each straw deposit that they made. So why deposit the whole straw right away if you can chop it up to 5 pieces and then get 5 treats? which meant that the devices had to be changed to a weight based system to keep up from the birds gaming the system around. I find that beautiful. This is the hacking behavior. One of the principles of hacking is to figure out how a system works and then start trying to give it different input and see what the output will be. Lovely, super clever. Another comment said, when I was young, my family did rescues of crows and ravens. My dad used to yell at us for eating all of the pistachios. It turns out that the birds figured out how to open their cage, eat the nuts, and then close the cage back, which is insane. This is, by the way, behavior that is also seen by some octopus. There was a story some years ago about the mysterious disappearing of some fish in some sort of center, and it turns out that there was an octopus that was escaping every night, opening somehow the lid of the compartment it was. It went for a walk, it would eat some of the fish, and then turn back to its designated place and lock the door behind it. And this has been something happening over time with octopuses escaping their tanks and researchers trying to make their tanks more secure. The first anecdote comes from almost 150 years back, where a paper reports that some young lumpfish were mysteriously disappearing from one of the tanks. Almost daily, there was a fresh and inexplicable vacancy in the gradually diminishing family circle. So the octopus would go eat some lumpfish and then return to its own tank. But let's get back to the crows. One more cool thing that crows do is apparently protect the ones who feed them. So there is a lot of behavior in protecting the homes of their human friends who keep bringing good treats. One of these reads, my husband goes on walks and takes peanuts for the crows. He lures them back to our house. He has been using the same call for them over time, so they know where we live. This is very beneficial to us, the comment says, because we have chickens, and the crows will attack any hawks that get near our house. Crows make excellent neighbors. And lastly, I will read you one of my favorite crow Reddit stories of all time. This has been on the top of Reddit, and it has somehow been verified by the moderators as well. I think it also made the local news. So I'm starting to read you the story. The title says, I accidentally created an army of crow bodyguards. Am I liable if they attempt murder? And it says, to make a long story short, I'm living in Portland, Oregon. I have a pretty intense emo goth phase as a teen, and I thought I had grown out of it. But after a couple months ago, I was watching a nature program on our local station about crows, and the program mentioned that if you feed and befriend them, crows will bring you small gifts. My emo phase came back full force, and I figured out that I had lots of time, so why not make some crow friends? The problem is that my plan worked a little too well, and the resident of 5 crows in my neighborhood has turned into an army of 15 crows strong. At first, my neighbors didn't mind and enjoyed it. They're mostly elderly, and most of them were in a bird watching club anyway, so they thought that the fact that I had crows following me around wherever I go is funny. But lately, the crows have started defending me. My neighbor came over for a socially distanced chat. I was at my porch and he was in my yard, and the crows started dive bombing her. They would not stop until she left the yard. The crows did not make physical contact with her, but they were flying down very, very close. So, my question is, am I liable if these crows injure someone since I feed them? To be clear, they are not aggressive 100% of the time. If just the neighbors are out, they are friendly and normal crows. They only get aggressive when someone gets close to me or my property. By the way, this is protecting their food resources. It makes a lot of sense, nature wise. Some months later, this post has been edited with an update. And it says, by the way, I called our local animal shelter place. They didn't think that feeding the crows was bad, and they suggested that the neighbors can also start feeding them, so they essentially become better socialized. That plan worked, and actually, the crows are a beloved part of the community. There have been no recent dive bombings But most amazingly, the crows may have legitimately saved my neighbor. Our city had a pretty big ice snow event recently, and most of the neighbors are pretty old. This is what happened. One of the neighbors was walking down a steep driveway, slipped, and couldn't get back up. And the crows started going ballistic, making a huge noise, making a huge mess, and making more noise than they had ever heard in that neighborhood. So a different neighbor went outside to see what was happening, and she found the gentleman in his driveway. The neighbor was okay, just some serious bruises, but since then the crows have been getting some even more high value food. This is such a lovely story. Reading you one more. Someone says, when I was about 15, there was this crow on my way to school that was trying to crack a nut on the street. I was an animal lover and a typical goth kid with heavy leather boots, so I just stomped the nut open, pressed on the nut with my boot, and it cracked. From then on, every single day, the crow was waiting patiently for me with a big pile of nuts next to it, and I stomped them open every time. This happened for some time until I finally left for college. But when I was visiting my parents and ran my old schoolway to meet up with some old friends, I was actually hit in the head with a nut, and a crow was circling above me. I don't know if it was actually my crow bro or a descendant, as studies have shown that crows can teach friends or foes to their children. I can just advise anyone to try and build a friendship with them if you have the opportunity. There is no feeling like befriending a wild animal. So, the last one I read was about some lady and her daughter that would feed a couple of crows on their back porch, and the crows started bringing them gifts. The mom was a photographer, and they would travel from their house to the city a lot. And they noticed that the crows would sometimes follow them. Now, the story goes on about saying how the mom took a photo from a bridge where she lost her lens cover. So, the cover for the lens of the camera, and how when they got back home on that day, the crow had brought the actual lens cover and left it on the porch together with the gifts. Now, there were probably too many stories about crows and ravens, more than what you hoped for. So, if you're looking for a New Year resolution, if you want to have something to feel good about yourselves and cool and lead you to wild adventures, easier than going to the gym, less demanding than starting a new hobby, then maybe try to get some peanuts and try to befriend a crow. You never know where this can take you. Thank you for sticking around, and as always, I wish you a great week ahead.